Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Sean Corney, and I'm the Communications Officer at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. Today's webinar, Maximising Your Use of Office 365, will be presented by Matt Walton, Senior IT Consultant at InfoExchange. Before I hand over to Matt to get underway today, just a bit of housekeeping. If you do have a question during the webinar, please type it in the question box on your GoToWebinar panel, and we'll aim to pause about halfway through the webinar to answer any questions you might have. Also, don't forget that a recording of today's presentation and a copy of the slides will be sent to you all as well, so please keep a lookout in your inboxes. That's all from me, so I'd now like to hand over to Matt. Thank you, Matt.
Exciting webinar about Office 365. So thanks for joining us today. This webinar is part of a series designed to really help not-for-profits of all shapes and sizes with their decision-making around technology. So some of you may have already been in our other webinars around implementation and around SharePoint and Microsoft Azure as well. So this one's really designed for organisations that are either already using Office 365 or are pretty close to deciding that they are keen to use Office 365. So it's about sharing with you some of the learnings that we've got from working with our hundreds of clients to understand what works well and what doesn't work well, and also what applications fit what purpose. So, as Sean said, happy to pause for questions at halfway and at the end as well. I'll make sure I leave a few minutes at the end for that. But if we don't cover it today, or if you want to dig into a bit more technical detail, then feel free to email me. My email address is on the last slide, and then we can follow up offline. So, as mentioned, InfoExchange are a not-for-profit, and we only work with other not-for-profits. So we do see a lot of different types of organisations in the sector, both very small clients with predominantly volunteer-run to large national not-for-profits with thousands of staff. So how Office 365 helps those organisations is quite different depending on their requirements and the type of organisation. So we're going to try and use that knowledge today to share some insights with you. So the key things that we're going to cover today is look at what's new. It's even since I ran this webinar last, probably about 3 or 4 months ago, I have had to update some of the slides already because Office 365 is changing quite regularly. So it is something that is important to keep an eye on, and always just understand what applications are suitable for you and which requirement. So that's the agenda today. Look at the broad Office 365, and then I'll go into a bit of a deep dive on a couple of common ones like SharePoint, Yammer, Skype for Business, mobility, talk about infrastructure and authentication, and then, as we said, save time for some questions. So just want to make sure that everyone's across. Really the first question is, why would I move to Office 365? What are the benefits? What are the key things that will help me justify this change when I'm talking to my board or my manager or my users? So what are the real benefits in moving and changing from the way that I've been doing it for many years? So often people are used to server-based technology and used to Exchange servers and those sort of things. So often it can be a change and a cost to move to new products like Office 365. So it's always important to link it back to why do you do it? And often it's around allowing you to get access to this modern technology, both from a hardware and software perspective, without having to outlay thousands of dollars for servers and new software. So it's also reducing your IT effort. So though all that time you used to spend maintaining your Exchange server and things like that, you don't have to worry about it anymore because Microsoft just looks after that for you. It also gives you a bit more security and flexibility around disaster recovery, and essentially all of this services are looked over by Microsoft. So it's not something that has to keep you awake anymore, or you're not the one that has to take the backup tapes off site and all of those things anymore. So it's really about giving you access to that at a pretty low cost. Although one of the most important things that organisations come to me with is mobility. So there's always that age-old issue of people struggling to get access to documents or applications on their file server in their office when they want to work from home or from a client site. So that whole mobility with laptops and tablets and smartphones nowadays is really important, and Office 365 gives you that flexibility to be able to do that, and we'll touch on that again later. And a lot of people have concerns about privacy and data security and making sure you're meeting your compliance requirements for your funding agreements and those type of things, and keeping your board happy from a risk management perspective. So again, Microsoft look after most of that, where they go off and do all the certifications, and they make sure they meet all the industry standards and best practices around hosting and storing it in Australia, and making sure that there's levels of security and protection around your data. So it's not something you need to worry about as much anymore now that Microsoft can look after it. Now, the whole point of technology usually is that it gives you an output of data, and business intelligence is that area where a lot of organisations are wanting to move into, to really display and access the data so that they can measure their outcomes and really understand the information in their organisation and be able to display that in a way that's meaningful to staff and boards and management. So, and again, Office 365 has those tools to allow you to do that. And the last point there is around collaboration. It's very common nowadays that people are working on a project-based environment, or wanting a lot of that cross-team collaboration, whereas I don't know if you can remember 10 years ago, but it was more team-based, whereas now it's a lot more collaboration required. And again, Office 365 just gives you the tools to be able to do that. So these benefit pillars here are based on research of what actually people are reporting they're getting out of Office 365 from a benefit perspective. All right, so now that we've talked broadly about the benefits, I just wanted to talk about the suite of Office 365. And as I said, it's changing regularly, and also it's different for every organisation. So as you'll see there, we have a lot of clients. Almost all of our managed clients are on Office 365, but many of them are predominantly using, and this is common in the sector, have moved there for email in the first sense. So that's mail, calendar, contacts, and tasks. So essentially, moving your Exchange server will get you 4 of those boxes that you've got on there, and whereas others are moving there more for document management, which is OneDrive and SharePoint sites there. So what you use is different for every organisation. And the most important thing to remember is you don't have to use all of them. And in many cases, not all of these are suitable. So even CRM there, it's a different product, but in the same menu. That is a separate add-on product that I use, but a lot of our clients don't. They have separate CRM or client management systems that they use. So I think the important thing to remember is there's a whole suite of applications, and it's up to you to pick and choose which ones suit your organisation. And hopefully by the end of today, you'll be a little clearer on how that works. And just as you're starting to understand everything that's available in Office 365, I expect they will change it, and they'll launch new features. So even we struggle to keep up with the pace of new features and functions and changes that are available in 365. So because it's a cloud-based application, what Microsoft and other cloud vendors do. They just release things as soon as they're ready. So no longer is it like Office 2007 is the same for 3 years, and then when you upgrade to 2010, it's slightly different. There's a regular release cycle of, you know, on a weekly basis, you're getting updates. So I get alerts every time something gets updated, and it's a very common thing in my inbox. So, and it's important for you to, again, understand with each new release what it is that's suitable for you. So it is all publicly available. If you just Google Office 365 Roadmap, or I'll send out a link as part of these slides, you can log on and see where things are coming. So you can see where your favorite features that might be currently in development, you can see when they're getting rolled out in Australia. So just keep an eye out for that, or again, find a partner that will keep you informed. So new features. So this is basically over the last 6 months. These are some new things that have been released in Office 365 that I thought would be relevant to some of you. So again, these are, and we'll dig into detail on some of these a little bit later, but these are some things that are either coming or have been released recently. So Skype for Business. So Skype for Business, obviously, you get free as part of Office, and it's part of your Office 365 E1 plan. So essentially you get it free. But if you want to extend to the next level of using Skype for Business, there is another plan called the E5 plan. So that's looking at starting to use it for more a phone system replacement, or to use it for sort of more web conferencing. So that PSTN conference dialing, which I use every day, it basically means you've got a phone number with every Skype meeting that you create, which means people can dial in on the phone even though you're on the computer. Voice integration is Cloud PABX, which is being launched later this year, which basically is a phone system replacement. So that's something to look out for if that's if a VoIP phone system is something on your radar. Mobile device management. So there's always new things in this space. There's other products like the Enterprise Mobility Suite is an add-on which you can buy for $2.10 per user per month. That gives you things like Intune and mobile device management and additional security and encryption. So a lot of our clients are starting to explore that from a device management perspective. Office 365 Planner is a project management tool similar to Trello, if any of you have used Trello. That's come out in the last sort of 6 months to a year, where many of our clients are starting to use this for project management and starting to enjoy that. And that ties in nicely with the next one, which is Office 365 Groups, which is working well for a lot of our clients from a collaboration, particularly a small group or that project teams or cross-team collaboration. It can be a reasonably easy way to get started with that. Although, again, it can get confusing. The more of these that come out, the more confusing it is to work out whether you use that or SharePoint or some of the other collaboration tools. Just to make it even more confusing, they're releasing another product soon called Office 365 Teams. Now, again, it's a bit of a group chat discussion board sort of platform, which will complement groups and also tie in with other. All of these are integrated together and can be used as a shared platform. The SharePoint Sync client, in the past, some of our clients have had issues with synchronization between SharePoint environments and their local PCs, and Microsoft have released a new SharePoint a OneDrive Sync tool recently that has resolved some of those issues. So that's a new one to keep an eye out for and do the update if you're interested. A couple of others that are out there and, again, still in development are Flow for workflows. Power App is a form builder that you can put on your mobile devices or web to essentially fill out information and submit it. Delve Analytics is an interesting one too, which comes as part of your Delve, which is your user profiles, but also gives you a sense of, it accesses information from your calendar and from your mail and gives you a sense of how you're working and how long you're in meetings every week. So if you go to your Dell profile and look at analytics, it's got some interesting stats there. So they're just a few of the new features that have come out in the last 6 months. So with each one of those, you need to have a think about what's going to work for your organization. So the process that we normally recommend for that is really making sure you're looking at those requirements and use cases first. So there's no point just starting to, buy all these add-ons to Office 365 or start playing with Flow and rolling out Office 365 groups if you haven't first thought about who's going to be using it and why are they using it. And what device will they be using it? And to be honest, all of these sort of questions will help you decide which tool is best, whether SharePoint is best or whether OneDrive is best, or whether Groups is best or whether Teams is best. So once you can answer all these questions, that will help inform your decision-making around applications. So, for example, if people are looking for more formal project management and want really Gantt charts and more formal processes, often we say, oh, well, look, SharePoint project management can do that. Whereas if you're more a casual, agile approach, then we often go to something like Planner. So, and the same with Yammer versus SharePoint. If you're more discussion-based, then Yammer works, whereas if you're more formal news central intranet, then SharePoint can work. So I think with all of these, you've just got to make sure there's motivation there and have some clarity around what success looks like. Because to be honest, you could spend all your time rolling out all these new tools, but if they're not relevant to staff, then there's no point because they won't end up using them. And to be honest, they'll just get confused as to what they should use and when. So I think there's some key things that each of you should think about before you just go off and start playing with these tools. So I've got here some examples of which applications are suitable and in what scenarios you should look at each one. So hopefully this is obviously just a guide. It's not a black and white art in terms of choosing which application. And these, as I said, these applications change quite regularly as well. So as mentioned before, Office 365 Groups is still a reasonably new feature, but it's starting to get a lot of traction and continually new features. And what we're seeing, it's doing quite well for collaboration in smallish teams. So it's not an enterprise intranet or anything like that, but can work for either project teams or cross-team collaboration from both documents and tasks and calendars and distribution lists. So that's working well. Yammer is still a really good tool for discussion and collaboration in groups, and also for external sharing and external networks as well. Yammer can work well. Whereas intranet's still really a good tool for an intranet and document collaboration. So SharePoint is still renowned as one of the best tools for those sort of intranets, particularly if you've got a high-level policies, procedures, resources. You've got many staff logging in to access them and download them. So I think, and boards as well. So SharePoint can work really well. And I think an important thing to mention across all of these is they're starting to be more and more integrated. So Yammer groups tie in with Office 365 groups, and SharePoint sites can also be part of Office 365 groups. So it is starting to become a more integrated mesh of information as opposed to totally separate applications that have different authentication and different purposes. Okay, Power BI is quite good for business intelligence and reporting, so pulling data from different pieces of application, even third-party applications, and then presenting it in a dashboard style. So we're seeing that starting to get more and more traction and become more useful for managers or boards or people that are really looking at business intelligence. Skype for Business is obviously good for messaging and video conferencing, and obviously I use it. My favourite function for Skype for Business is even just that point of presence, to know where all your staff are and know whether at their desk or not, and just send some casual messages. So it's how you tie these applications together from an informal to a more formal. So in what cases do you use an instant message, and in what cases do you use an email, are important questions for you to answer. Skype OneDrive for Business is still really good for storing individuals' documents, being able to access them from home or your mobile device, and in some cases share them to even externals as well if you need. SharePoint can be set up to be used for forms, lists, databases, so it is really a flexible tool, and many organisations use it for their basic electronic forms, which means staff can access it from anywhere and fill out a form that then goes into a database which is managed centrally. So I'd encourage you to explore that. The mobile apps, which we'll touch on again later, are quite good nowadays. So there's an Outlook mobile app that does emails, calendars, contacts for mobiles. So you can obviously configure the Apple or Android apps for email, but I would encourage you to explore that Microsoft suite of apps on the mobiles as well. Project management we touched on before. You could use either SharePoint or Planner, depending on who's accessing it and what level of project management you require. So what I might do, Sean and everyone, I might just pause there for a minute just to allow some time for questions. So I don't know if here's your chance to type some into the message box, and then if we don't get to it in this section, we can cover it at the end or offline. So Sean, I might throw to you to see if there's any questions.
Hey Matt, yeah, thank you. So we've had a question from Candell who asks, is OneDrive for Business different to just OneDrive? Is this a paid add-on?
Yeah, so you can actually get a personal OneDrive. So a lot of people will be familiar with OneDrive that you can just register and get, and often you can buy it from Officeworks as well. And so OneDrive for Business is part of a suite of applications under your Office 365 E1 Enterprise plan. So all of these applications sit under what we call an enterprise plan. So when I talk about you get a free E1, which is what Microsoft offer free, then that's all enterprise. So OneDrive for Business essentially does a similar thing to what the personal things do. So you can still store documents, you can still sync it to your local computer, you can still share, but it does have some additional functionality as well. And just to confuse things, OneDrive for Business is also the name of the synchronization tool that you can use to sync SharePoint and other documents to your local PC.
Great, thanks Matt. Our next question is from Andrew, who's just seeking some clarification around the difference between the chat function on Yammer versus Skype for Business.
Yeah, so generally Skype for Business you would typically use more for a one-on-one chat, and that chat is actually integrated with your Outlook as well. So any chats I have on Skype for Business do get saved in my conversation history in Outlook, and it's generally not for future, typically not for future reference within the Skype for Business app. So you have your chat and then it's archived in the conversation history. Whereas Yammer is more a discussion board. So it's typically more what you would use in groups where you're having a chat across your whole organization or a group within your organization, where the discussion lives there forever unless someone deletes it. So essentially they're the two different types of chats. And just to confuse things, Office 365 Teams will also be a more chat-based function, more like a discussion board. So somewhere in the middle, to be honest, between Yammer and Skype for Business.
Great, thank you, Matt. And we've got another question. So Candel is also seeking a bit more information about the Skype for Business application. So is that something that you're going to go into in a little bit more detail later on, or should we perhaps save that conversation for the end?
Let's do both. So I do have a couple of slides on Skype and SharePoint and Yammer, actually. So we can come back to it at the end if I don't cover it.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Matt. We have had a couple more questions come through, but what we might do is, if you're happy, continue with the rest of the presentation and then come back to these ones at the end.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
Okay. All right. So this next section is more about looking at specific applications. Obviously, the suite of applications is so broad, I couldn't cover all of them. And obviously, as mentioned before, we do a whole 1 hour on SharePoint, and we also have do-it-yourself workshops on email exchange and SharePoint as well. So we unfortunately can't get into too much detail, but I'll do what I can. All right, so SharePoint Online is basically a tool that you used to have to install on a server. So people had SharePoint 2007, 2010, and people can use SharePoint for a range of different things. So it's almost one of the most flexible tools in this suite, and people can use it quite differently. So and the other thing that you can see on these three pictures is you can make them look different as well. So you've got the one on the bottom right, which is more a resource hub where people can log in and just access information there, clicking on those nice looking images. The middle one there for Kids Undercover is more a project management tool that people use to store documents and tasks on a particular project, whereas the top one there, the HR department portal, it's more a portal where you log in and fill out forms and access information. So it is quite a flexible tool, and again, it's free as part of your E1 Office 365 plan, and it's accessible online from any web browser, basically. So it's a real jump from, I was one of those poor IT managers many years ago that used to have to look after a SharePoint server and maintain that for sort of thousands of users. So it was quite difficult, whereas now Office 365, you just get it as part of it free. So it's very generous of Microsoft, and it's a really exciting tool. One of the things that gets confusing with SharePoint, and I'm expecting there's probably a couple of questions in that message about this, is how to use SharePoint for document management alongside some of these other document management tools. So, and how do I access it offline? So essentially, generally, we usually recommend SharePoint as an intranet, and it can be used in some scenarios as a central document management system, and some of our clients can use it instead of a file server. Now, we don't always recommend that, but it is something that is possible. So you essentially can set up as many different team sites as you want. You can have a high-level intranet, and you can set up multiple sites and have different permissions for different areas of your organization, and store all your documents centrally. OneDrive, we typically recommend that it's more an individual user's location for storing documents. So personally, I use both OneDrive and SharePoint. I use OneDrive for my day-to-day working documents where no one else needs access. It's like what I used to store 10 years ago on my C drive or my desktop. Now my default spot for storing stuff that isn't necessarily that important is my OneDrive. And I get a terabyte of storage there, so it's not something most people fill up. Whereas anything I'm working on with my team, or any important information that Info Exchange need in the future, I save on SharePoint so that my whole team can access. And to be honest, if I left the organization and they deleted my account and they deleted my OneDrive, it wouldn't matter because I store all my important things on SharePoint. Now, both of those tools, and I have a laptop, both of those tools can be synced with your laptop so that you've got some files offline. So I sync my OneDrive so that when I'm on a plane or when I'm offline, I can access some of those documents. And likewise with SharePoint. So the areas that I use frequently, I sync so that I can store some local files. And then when I edit them and then when I go back online, they synchronize back up. So that's something that Microsoft have been working on recently to improve that synchronization process. And again, it's similar to Dropbox and some of those other tools out there on the market. So in addition to documents, SharePoint also has these things called lists, which means that you can use forms to do, so there's a thing there called staff IT requests as an example. So instead of you filling out a paper form or a Word document and then scanning it, you can actually just create an online form, either in SharePoint or you can look at Power Apps as well. And that information, as you fill out the form, goes into it's called a list, but it's like a database. And then once it's in there, you can then do things like workflows, which means people get alerts, or if you need to create actions out of that, you can notify people that they have to do something because someone's put in a request in the SharePoint list. So it's a pretty flexible tool, and you can customize it to collect pretty much any information you want. So we typically don't recommend it as a replacement for things like client management systems or CRMs, but for just some basic data collection from your staff or little basic requests, it's quite a handy tool that can improve your efficiency internally. The other thing that it does from a document management perspective is it's challenging the way that a lot of people used to work. So you can still have folders if that's the way you like to do things, but it has the functionality to be able to tag things in a different way to allow you to search and find easier. So, for example, if you've got a privacy policy, I'm sure you would have used to have the debate to say, oh, where do I store this final version of the privacy policy? Do I store it in the policy folder, or do I store it in the privacy folder, or do I store it in the CEO folder, or my desktop? And I think the answer to that usually was we end up storing it everywhere. And then there's confusion about where it's stored. Whereas nowadays you can just store it once in one spot on your intranet and then tag it with multiple things. So you could tag that it's a policy, or tag that it's a part of the communications department, tag that it's part of the risk management department. And then when you search and filter, you can go, show me all the policies, and everything across all departments shows up. So look, that's quite a detailed subject, but I just thought I'd raise that as an option for you to be able to start thinking about more advanced ways to store your information, in addition to being able to just use folders. All right. The other thing that's challenging the way that we do things is Delve. So Delve is essentially, it's not something you need to set up, it's just there behind the scenes automatically. And it's essentially your user profile as part of Office 365. And it's automatically creating your org chart. So a lot of people say, oh, I need to upload my PDF of my org chart. And essentially we say, well, actually, no, you've got an inbuilt org chart that's dynamic, and it changes as you add and remove users to Office 365. So that's another sort of great tool. And from a document perspective or an information perspective, it also allows you to search and find documents in a way that goes across all these different applications. So for me, if I'm trying to find a recent document that I can't remember where I stored it, doesn't matter if I stored it on OneDrive or my SharePoint or one of my client SharePoint sites or someone else's OneDrive, as long as I've edited it with my user profile, I can come into my Delve and see all the things that I've edited recently and accessed. And likewise, I can see what other people are doing. So I can see what my colleagues Joey or Marcus, I can see that they have some recent documents that they've worked on, assuming I have permission. So again, you don't have to do it this way, or have to use Delve, but it's starting to be a more useful tool, and a lot of people are starting to use it also for user profiles and adding skills and expertise and what projects people are working on as part of here, and using it as their company reference point for information on their people and staff in their organization. So we have one client who's using it to add skills for people who speak different languages. So, you know, you would mark in your profile, yes, I speak fluent Chinese, and then if anyone's looking for someone with that can translate, or looking for someone with that particular skill, they can just log into Delve and search around for that. So that's another key tool that, again, Microsoft's continuing to deliver. All right, so before you just go and launch into SharePoint and create sites and start having a play, what I would do is consider these key points. So firstly, a lot of people come to me and say, hey, I want to get rid of my file server, can I just dump it all on SharePoint? And usually the answer is no, that's not the best way to do things. So in many cases, some organizations, if you've got a lot of videos and large files, sometimes, and a poor internet connection, sometimes putting them all up online isn't the best solution. So you may still need a server or a network attached storage for some of your large files in some scenarios. So it's more just something to consider. Don't automatically assume you can just dump everything online. The other thing is, are staff willing to change the way they access documents? So if someone's been saving things to a file server for 30 years and you all of a sudden want to start getting them to tag documents and not use folders and use online, and it's a significant change. So it's more about gauging the appetite for change, and then going through that change management, the training, the awareness, the engagement of your staff when you're implementing new solutions to make sure that it's right for your organization. The other point there, number 3, are there simple processes that can be done using SharePoint-Lists. So maybe it's some basic forms that you're doing internally that you think, oh, well, that's a good, easy, quick win, or we can just pop that on SharePoint in the short term to save all that admin that we usually do. The other one is Office 365 groups. So to be honest, some small organizations, instead of setting up a SharePoint intranet for 10 staff, they just use a couple of Office 365 groups, which are a little bit easier to set up. They don't have the same functionality, but sometimes a group or something more basic, or even OneDrive, is enough in the short term at least. So that's something to look at. And the same with Yammer. If you're looking for more a discussion and collaboration platform, and you're not worried about document management, or you're not worried about forms, well then Yammer may actually be a good solution for you. And to be honest, it's easier to set up than SharePoint is. So these are just a few of the considerations that we encourage organizations to think about. And to be honest, when we work with organizations to implement SharePoint, these are some of the things that we try and tease out and understand before we do any implementations. All right, can go into a bit more detail on SharePoint at the end, or again, we've got another webinar, I think, next month on SharePoint, so we'll come back to that. But I just wanted to touch on Skype for Business. So I know someone mentioned that before. So look, it is a free tool. Skype for Business comes as a desktop application as part of Office Professional Plus. So if you've got Office 2016 bought through Connecting Up or through Office 365, you've probably got Skype for Business sitting on your desktop already. And generally, while there needs to be a couple of configuration things in the back end, generally if you've set up Office 365 for email and the other applications, Skype for Business should work. So it can be a quick and easy win where you can just start using it for instant messaging and see the point of presence there, where you can see the green or the yellow or the blue to see where your colleagues are available or offline or what they're doing and their locations. So it does integrate with your calendars and it integrates with your user profiles. So it's a good way to help learn about the people in your organization. To be honest, we had someone start here yesterday at Info Exchange, and one of the first things I said was, go and have a look at Skype, because you're never going to remember everyone's names, but all their photos should be on Skype for Business, so have that open, and when someone sort of emails you or talks to you, you should be able to reference their user profile on Skype for Business. So the other thing, as I said, you can use it for video conferencing as well as instant messaging and screen sharing. So you do require an internet connection to use Skype for Business, and particularly if you've got multiple people wanting to use video conferencing a lot, and if you're on a poor ADSL connection or you're on Wi-Fi and the Wi-Fi is a bit patchy in the location where you are, I would encourage you to look at reviewing your internet connections, or as a minimum, make sure you're cabled in. So at the moment, there isn't any phone integration for voice calls. So Cloud PABX is actually coming out later this year. It's a more long-term thing. So at the moment, Skype for Business is a standalone application. And it's also, while it's slightly integrated, it's also standalone from normal Skype, from desktop Skype. You can share contacts and there's a bit of integration, but generally, if you've got a desktop Skype account, it's going to be typically different from your Skype for Business account as part of your Office 365. The other recommendation that I would give is things like using a headset, or making sure you're not using Wi-Fi when you're doing video or audio, and you're plugged in, or have a good internet connection. So, and also make sure your equipment's got good microphones and cameras as well, if that's what you're using. You can use external contact sharing. So in my Skype, I've got a lot of my clients or people from Connecting Up or Microsoft or other organizations that I deal with. So that's something that you can do as well. All right, PSTN conferencing, as I said, the E5 license, which I use, is $13 per user per month. So I know that's expensive, but that's also instead of the E3. So if you're using E3, it's only an extra $6. So, and it can also save you money on using other video conferencing applications. So it's something to consider anyway, or it will also, E5 will also get you down the Cloud PABX path eventually when that comes out. All right, moving on from Skype for Business. All right, is Yammer. So, sorry, let me just double check that. So Yammer is a tool that, to be honest, Microsoft bought Yammer a few years ago, or probably more like 5 years ago now, and it was a totally separate tool, but now they've bought it and they've integrated into Office 365. So you do get Yammer, again, free as part of your E1 plan and Office 365. So it's a really good collaboration tool, both internally and externally. We have several clients who have set up an external network and have their clients or others use that for discussion. We use Yammer here at Info Exchange as our internal communication. So instead of things like, you know, baby announcements or, hey, it's someone's birthday, let's come and have cake in the kitchen, or those sort of things, it's really reducing the amount of emails you used to have in your inbox for all that sort of communication, and pushing it to an application like Yammer, which can be used for anything essentially. So we use it for a lot of that informal communication, but also for that cross-organisational discussion. So we have an environment group here who are looking at taking us carbon neutral and looking at improving our practices around in the environment, and they're from all different departments across our organisation. So we have a Yammer group for that. So we have that all our discussion about those initiatives is done in the Yammer group, and anyone who's interested in the environment can just join that Yammer group. You can also have private Yammer groups as well. So that's Yammer, and all of these apps, I didn't mention it with Skype for Business and SharePoint, and I'll mention it here with Yammer, they all have good mobile apps. So to be honest, Yammer, I actually do most of my Yammer reading and even posting on my mobile phone on the way home in the train. The same with SharePoint and Skype for Business. So it's quite good from a mobile perspective. All right, so if you wanted to set up a Yammer network, you would, again, like everything else, you'd define the key purpose, you develop a content plan, you've got the functionality around an acceptable usage policy and what people should be posting and what they shouldn't, confirm the admins, set up your groups, and invite your guests. And I think with all of these, it's more about proactively driving the adoption and giving people a reason to go there and stop them from sending out the all staff emails and encourage them to start moving towards these type of platforms. As I mentioned with mobility, so actually that even that screenshot there, since I took that screenshot a month or two ago, I've actually got about 5 other apps now through Office 365, things like Power Apps and Flow and other tools that are now available through Office 365, even the Outlook app. So I would encourage you to look in your app stores, and if you're using mobile devices, even things like Office Lens and other mobile tools, as opposed to just configuring Apple Mail and those sorts of things. So the other thing, if you're using mobile devices, to consider is mobile device management. So as part of Office 365, you do get free mobile device management, but you need to configure that and enroll each device. So that's an important thing to look at. There is also a more advanced mobile device management tool that is also available for things like Surface Pros and Windows 10 devices, which is called Intune, and it comes as part of the Enterprise Mobility Suite. So you can actually get all of this as a $2.10 add-on per user per month, and you get an additional suite of add-ons for mobile. I'd also consider having those offline files. As I said before, you can sync your documents with your laptop like I do, and it gives you a bit of that business continuity. But on the other side of it, I would just make sure you've considered what your backup plan is for internet access. So I know for me, if I'm at a location where the internet struggles, I just use my tether off my mobile phone or have a Telstra dongle or something like that. So as long as you've got a plan, or go to the local library. So as long as you've got a plan, then you're more prepared for that whole mobile working arrangement. All right, Power Apps is the other one I mentioned before for mobile phones. All right, so as we talked about, adoption is the most important thing. So you can do as much work as you want on setting up these great applications, but unless they add value or that staff understand the benefits, then they're probably not going to use them because they're too busy doing the great work out in the community that you're here to do. So I think it's more around how you justify this to them and essentially sell the business case to them to say this is why this should make your life easier. The other thing, you can do some little things like naming and branding your intranet, or create a network of power users and get your CEO and your power users and those sort of things to really promote these new tools and help with that adoption and that user training. And to be honest, a lot of the best training for these tools isn't formal work instructions, or it isn't going off and doing a course. It's a lot of that casual learning where it's a lunchtime session or a bit of a workshop or one-on-one where one of the champions or power users just sits with the key people for half an hour just to make sure they're at least trying these new things. And just make it part of your staff meeting and give them reasons to go there on a regular basis. So we have a lot of organisations that push people to their intranet to access payslips and things that they get on a regular basis or need to get. So I would have a think about that before you, again, start launching into these new tools. All right. Look, the other thing that we find is it's important to have your infrastructure right to help you use these things effectively. I have people call me up and go, oh, Skype for Business isn't working. And then when we understand it, they're on an old laptop with Office 2010. They don't have a headset. They're trying to access the Wi-Fi on ADSL, and they're trying to run a video conference. And it just, you need to make sure all the things around Office 365 are set up in a way that supports them. So these are a few of the things. Now again, there's no hard and fast rule around a lot of these. These are more just some general tips or things for you to think about before you roll this out or to make sure it works effectively for you. So look, I'm not saying everyone needs to upgrade their connections, but generally if you're heavy users and you've got sort of 20 staff or more, generally you need what's a synchronous connection where it's 20 meg upload and download. Whereas if you're on ADSL, you're probably getting a 10 meg download, but you're probably getting under 1 for an upload, which really puts a dampener on things like video conferencing, syncing files, saving to SharePoint, those sort of things. So I would generally encourage people to at least get quotes and explore your internet connectivity at your head office. The other thing is a lot of people try and get away with 5-year-old desktops. When, to be honest, you can get a good laptop now for under $1,000, and that will last you another 3 or 4 years, and it just makes everyone's life so much easier, and you will really notice the difference between the old desktops and the new laptops. And again, if you're looking at making sure there's Windows 10 Pro and Office 2016 Pro Plus, and even things like touch screens and stylus, like I love using my my touchscreen laptop for OneNote. So when I'm in meetings, I jot things down on, and it goes directly into OneNote. Or I take photos through my webcam or through my phone and through Office Lens and put that straight into my OneNote. So just having the tools to be able to do what you want to do. And as I said, Skype for Business is a good example with headsets, camera and speakers. And like if you're trying to run a web conference in your boardroom or something like that, I think just putting that extra effort in, making sure it's all set up in the right way, you've got the right cameras and speakers, and often just trying to do this at the last minute without any thought can have bad experiences when you're trying to run a board meeting on Skype for Business without planning what equipment you're going to use. The good smartphones nowadays, again, I use my iPhone, but they're similar on Android and Windows, where I'm in meetings, I take photos of whiteboards in my Office Lens on a good camera, and it automatically goes into my OneNote or OneDrive, and I can convert that to text and a range of other things. So there's these lots of cool features if you've got a reasonably modern smartphone. Not saying you have to go out and buy a new one every 6 months every time Apple releases it, but just having something that's not an old 5-year-old Nokia. The other one, mobile device management, is important to consider. Directory synchronization, so making sure that your local password is the same as your Office 365 password can break down one of those barriers that often staff have in, oh, I can't remember my Office 365 password. So that's something to think about. And local storage. So again, you don't want to try and make Office 365 upload every single video or photo that you have. if that's going to ruin your internet connection. So I think just considering what you store local and what you move to the cloud, and also what other cloud systems like Microsoft Azure are out there. So, all right, just wrapping up. I know we've got only a couple more minutes. This is talking about that authentication. So directory synchronization is something we usually recommend for over 50 users. It's setting it up on a server so that you've got a synchronization between your local Active Directory and Office 365. So you've got a single username and password. All right, let's sum up with some top tips. So really it's about just using the applications that add value to your organization and staff. If you're rolling out each new application every 2 months, every time Microsoft releases something, your staff are going to get really wary of change, and there's going to be that sort of change fatigue. So just making sure that everything you do adds value to your organization or makes your staff's life easier, not harder. So have some sort of vetting process before you launch in everything new. Just make sure you've got an opportunity to review that. And as well as if you use it, make sure you're considering how you use it. So make sure that how you use OneDrive is consistent across your organization and that it is how it's designed to be used. And likewise with things like groups or teams or anything new, just making sure it's set up in the way that it works for your organization. Explaining the benefits both to your staff and your management, and engaging them to help make the most. So having those local champions and not just making a top-down approach. Now, I think you'll notice none of this is necessarily technical. It's more general across most IT projects, not necessarily just Office 365. As I said, make sure your infrastructure is set up in the right way that doesn't produce any barriers for using this, because often if the internet or the mobiles or the video conferencing equipment is not set up right, they'll try something and then they'll never try it again because it didn't quite work. And make sure you resource this. So even this is an internal staff member that can have a bit of ownership of this, or an external provider, to make sure that you're providing support to staff. All right, so the other thing I'll just mention before I open up for questions is there are other supports available. So we're doing these things called readiness assessments with Connecting Up, where we'll essentially come up with a bit of an implementation plan for you and work out whether you are suitable for Office 365 and give you some broad costs on how much these things cost from an implementation perspective. So that's only $100. So if you're not sure and you need help justifying it to the board, a readiness assessment is a good way to do it. The other thing that we're doing is DIY workshops. So if you can't afford to outsource this and you've got some bit of expertise in technology, we can train you up on how to do SharePoint yourself, for example, or how to do your email migration. So again, that's via webinar, and it's 3 one-hour sessions where one of our engineers will actually talk you through how to do it and provide you with some support. So have a look at those workshops. And we regularly I'm running a monthly webinar on a range of different topics. So as I said, we've got ones for Azure, we've got ones for SharePoint, we've got ones for email migrations. So any other topics, happy to do those as well. But if you want some one-on-one implementation services or support or advice or ongoing support, feel free to contact me or Info Exchange. There's my phone number and email address down the bottom. And likewise, if you've got any more detailed questions, I know we didn't go into a lot of technical depth today, but if you've got any questions, feel free to send that through, and happy to help out. Again, we're a not-for-profit. We're just here to help build the capacity in the sector and give you guys access to these great tools so that you can do better work out in the communities. So hopefully today has helped. So happy to open up for questions, Sean, and I know it's just on 3. I'm happy to stay around for as long as we've got questions for, if you are as well.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, we've had a few more questions come through. So first one is from Jackie, who just asked, are there any examples available of guidelines that organizations already use for staff to decide which 365 applications to use when it seems like we would need to come up with some protocols around around when staff should use certain applications like Yammer, Skype, etc. Would you say the readiness assessment is a good place for these guys to start, or is there any other help centre that you might be able to direct them to?
Yes, it is. I think a readiness assessment is a good start. I think we often refer to the Microsoft resources, but Microsoft resources are more about here's what the tool does. It doesn't really give you advice on how to use it and when to use it and when not to use it. So I think the first most important thing to think about, and again this is where we help organisations, is what do you actually need? So document that first, and once you know what you need, then you can match that with each of the applications. So even that slide I had where there was a table around what your requirements are on the left column, and then on the right there was which Office 365 applications. You could even just use that to start writing your requirements down on the left, and then once you finish writing your requirements, start matching them across. But so look, there isn't a one definitive spot for that, and often it's quite nuanced, so that you often do, this is where you should either speak to your support provider or get some advice, or get something like a readiness assessment. So hope that helps, but I'm happy to have again a one-on-one chat if there's any specific questions. But yeah, normally it's a process we go through. There's no right or wrong answer, is unfortunately the answer.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. Our next question is from Christine, who asked, is business intelligence part of the E1 enterprise plan?
Yeah, so you do get Power BI, like an end user access version of Power BI, but if you want actually the admin part of Power BI, where you do a lot of the configuration behind the scenes, that's actually an additional license. So what a lot of organizations do is have one or two people who do a lot of the configuration of the business intelligence and the dashboards and reporting, have one or two that can configure it behind the scenes with a additional license. I think it's around $10 off the top of the head. And then the rest of the users can access those reports and dashboards for free. But to get you can actually get a desktop version or an admin version of Power BI. It is an additional cost.
Great, thanks, Matt. Our next question is from Mandy, who asks, does Office 365 align with the Australian privacy principles?
Yes. So I suppose there's a lot around that question. It depends what part you're looking. So the privacy principles are generally about storing client data. So there is no definitive yes or no that says you can or you can't store client data in Office 365. We have many clients who do. But it's more, and it is stored in Australia if that's one of your key things, but generally each organisation makes their own decision and does their due diligence around what they're storing in Office 365 and what they're not. And if they're storing it in Office 365, what protections they have in place. So Microsoft have a lot of certifications around privacy and security and data protection. So they do a lot, and to be honest, a lot more than a lot of other organizations. And also, there are additional tools and lots of different configurations you can do in Office 365 to make sure there's plenty of security around that. So there's permissions, there's two-factor authentication, there's layers of security there that you can put on to ensure that your client data isn't going to get out. But at the end of the day, it's not something that I can tell you yes or no. You can or can't store your client data, but Many of our clients have separate client management systems or CRMs where they store client data. But other clients, when we talk to them, they're already, and looking at comparison, they're worried about storing it in Office 365. We compare that to they're currently storing it on a server sitting under a desk in an unlocked office, which is possibly more of a risk. A lot of people are already storing it in Dropbox, which is stored overseas on a personal Dropbox account. So it's looking at where you're at now, what level of risk you're willing to take. But I can tell you that there are a lot of organisations, including governments, Queensland Government, and large not-for-profits and large corporates that are all storing data in Office 365. So I know that was a bit of a long answer, but it's not a simple question.
Thanks, Matt. Our next question is, can you customize the Office 365 dashboard to only display applications which your organization uses?
Short answer is yes. And you can also customize it to add in other applications that aren't part of Office 365. So you can actually add in things like Salesforce or Smartsheet or other apps that may not be part of the Office 365 suite.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. And now, so you did speak a little bit earlier about Skype for Business, and Candell has asked, can you please talk a little bit more about Skype for Business plan as a replacement telecommunications phone system? We are looking to upgrade our telecommunications system and keen to explore different options from the traditional solutions. Do you think this is a cost-effective solution?
So there are a few different ways to do that, and to be honest, it hasn't actually been released in Australia yet, the Cloud PABX product. So there are a few components to that. So there's the E5 license, which is $13 a user a month. But in addition to that, there's also additional costs for like buying numbers, essentially. You would essentially buy your phone numbers from Microsoft if you were using Cloud PABX as your phone system. There's also other components around the call center, sort of voicemail. So it's looking at what your requirements are around telephony and how important that is to you. We definitely have clients who are using Skype for Business as a phone system and using their laptops as soft phones with headsets. Now that sort of arrangement is also a hosted Skype for Business, which means it's sitting on someone's server, and there are organisations out there who host these Skype for Business for you, which is more like a $8 a user a month product. It's a hosted product as well. So there are a few different layers of telephony in Skype for Business that would be worth exploring. It's definitely worth exploring, and it's not something generally you would do yourself, so you would find a partner, a telephony partner that would deliver that for you. When you're looking at Cloud PABX, you definitely need to look at your internet connections and your hardware and your headsets and all of those things, but it is a consideration. I wouldn't necessarily say it's going to be the cheapest option. If you've got an old PABX sitting on your wall, it's probably not going to be cheaper than that. But moving forward, if you want to give your users flexibility and mobility to go off and make phone calls from their laptops from any location, and you want to transfer calls across the country and those sort of things, then it is the type of platform that is available. But I would also probably... depends on your timeline, because Microsoft will release the Cloud PABX. We can check the roadmap, but Cloud PABX is due out definitely this year in Australia. It's already up and running in the States.
Great, thank you, Matt. So that appears to be all of our questions for today, so might wrap it up. But before doing so, is there anything more that you wanted to add?
No, I don't think so. It's more just hoping this helped you on your journey to get the most out of products like Office 365. Obviously, we're happy to help, and InfoExchange has a range of services that we can help you with if you want to have that discussion. So feel free to contact me directly, either just for a bit of advice or to look at what services we can help you with.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Matt, for presenting today, and thank you everyone for joining us. If you do have any questions following this webinar, please feel free to contact Matt at mmoulton@infoexchange.org, or you can always send your questions through to events@connectingup.org and we can pass them on. Remember, a recording of today's presentation and a copy of the slides will be sent to you all in the coming days, so please keep a lookout in your inbox. Thanks again, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Sean.